you, Harish. Thank you, everyone who's logged in this morning to listen to me.
Hello.
I'm really excited to speak for HR Milestone for the first time. So I'm hoping that you're going to find this meaningful. So welcome, everyone, and very good morning to all of you. I must thank you for finding the time. I know everyone's at work at home, but you still found the time to be able to log into this on a morning. So you're obviously putting something aside to be able to build your capabilities. So I want to congratulate you for that. I know that HR Milestone offers a whole host of webinars. We're also doing some of that through the LNOD Roundtable. So it's fabulous to use this time to be able to find at least an hour during the day to be able to continue sharpening the saw. So congratulations for doing that. My topic for today is winning heads, hearts, and hands. And I do know that when I gave Harish this topic, he wanted to know what does that really mean. And I said that let people find out after they've logged in, and we've spoken a bit about winning heads, hearts, and hands. What does that really mean, especially in the times that we're actually poised within? Also, what a time for compassion. So I want to talk about how well poised we are right now for engagement, how well poised we are for compassion. Some of it may sound a little paradoxical or may sound a little quizzical, but we're going to try and discover and explore that through the core of this webinar. I'm planning to run you through this for about 40-45 minutes, post which I'm delighted to answer questions. You have a chat box on your right, so continue posting your questions so we don't miss anything as we go along. I'd be delighted to see what your comments and your own views are as I'm sharing what I am, because this is all close to our hearts. It's something we do every day. That's my choreography. The companies I worked for, I think Sunil spent enough time talking about it, so I'm going to just move forward to simply say that we're clearly living in unbelievable turbulent times. I mean, this is really incredible. And I think even for people who have 30 and 40 years of experience, have not experienced anything as incredible as this. I mean, when we spoke about disaster management and the rest, we at best spoke about fires, we spoke about floods, we spoke about riots. We did have the odd 2611, but nothing to beat what we're experiencing right now. So I want to be able to call out how incredible these times are and how incredible these times are for reflection, for learning. This is impacting, businesses all over the world, economies all over the world. Every single individual who's on the surface of this earth is impacted by this. It must get us back to the drawing board in terms of how we want to redefine our lives going forward. It must redefine how it is that we want to do business going forward. It must redefine how it is that we want to lead people going forward. The economies and the governments and every single forum and association and bodies of people must go back to be able to figure what contribution do they really make? How is it actually adding value to human life and existence? And I think we're now also keenly aware of our mortality with simply what it is that we're experiencing every day. And if you don't call these turbulent times, then what will you call turbulent times? For the last 10 years, we've been talking about how things have changed. We've been talking about continued market volatility. We've been talking about changing employee expectations and the whole emergence of talent and attracting and retaining talent and what organizations need to do to become attractive to talent. The shifting technology landscape, which has clearly been the biggest disruptor of our time. And thank God for that, because if we didn't have technology, we wouldn't be able to manage a fraction of the continuity that we're managing right now. I have this slide on VUCA, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. I know we spoke a lot about this. In fact, this has been the central theme of most of our conferences and seminars and perhaps articles and a lot of intellectual inquiry around how complex these times are, how volatile they are, how difficult it is to be able to read the market, how difficult it is to be able to connect up the dots, the kind of sheer ambiguity and uncertainty within which leaders and employees and governments have to be able to make decisions. Having said all of that, I've always had rather quizzical responses from people when we've spoken about this, and I do work with lots of organizations and especially with their leadership teams, helping them to manage change. And whenever we're talking about VUCA, there's always been a bit of a quizzical comeback on what exactly are we talking about. Because for a lot of people, particularly for tenured employees, it's been the same workplace, it's been the same leader, you're coming back to the same office, it's pretty much the same decor, you're seeing very much the same people around. You're just wondering, what exactly do people mean by VUCA? Because nothing's really significantly changed around me, and has the world really so dramatically changed? And I want to be able to revisit this right now to say, who can stand on the surface of this earth and say that they don't find this situation complex, volatile, ambiguous, and uncertain? Suddenly, boom, like a bang, everyone's now aware and can understand completely what we mean by VUCA. And we've actually been seeing this coming for some time. And I have a snapshot here of everything that's happened over the last 10 plus years. Starting with the financial crash in 2008, when on earth did we ever see that coming? The Arab Spring in 2010-11 and the rise of the Islamic State, the mass displacement of people across Middle East and Europe, and the Brexit phenomena, which was actually called regretted for a very long period of time internally. But whoever thought that that Britain's membership in the European Union would be under question? The trials and tribulations of both the presidential candidates in the 2016 US election campaigns, and I don't want to talk about the candidate that finally won because we leave that for another webinar. He still continues calling it the Chinese virus, so that's another story. US-China enter in a trade war. It was volatile, but we didn't quite see this coming. Emerging markets growth will deaccelerate to 4.6%. I'm wondering what this number is going to be right now. 2020 coronavirus originating from China becomes a global pandemic affecting more than 1 million people globally and leading to lockdowns of all economies all around the world. Who's going to question VUCA after this? If this is not VUCA, what is? And I want everyone who's a professional at this time, working within organizations at this time, anyone who's living in these times, just to be able to recognize the sheer incredibility of the times that we're existing in. What a time, what an opportunity to be able to drive insight, reflection, growth, learning. What a time to be able to reassess, reconsider everything that we've been doing so far, the way, in fact, we've been shaping the society and building the world. Here is an opportunity to go right back and rewrite all of this. And what an incredible time to raise children, and what an incredible time to be able to build resilience. And talking about resilience, I want to draw your attention to this trend here. I often spoke about trends in different forums. I spoke about trends in the context of organizations and internal HR teams who were looking at building up their agendas and so on. And we didn't invariably talk about this trend, and I would get quizzical expressions back from the audience. We talk about organizational resilience management. And here we really were referring to disaster preparedness, emergency response plans, continuity of operations plans. And I think most of us thought we didn't quite need this. How is this a trend, and why should we have to work on this in advance? And I do know in pockets there are organizations who invest in scenario building, and there is contingency planning. There's some form of business continuity plan. We do refer to business continuity in different points in time, but I'm not sure how seriously this agenda has really been taken across organizations. And the reason I say it is the sheer reaction we got when we did come down with the lockdown, and when COVID-19 became a reality for us within India. So here it is. This pandemic has finally got organizations, whether it's in the private sector, government, non-government, to suddenly start taking the whole phenomena of working from home seriously. From the time we've had the advent of the internet, there's been all the opportunities galore to be able to allow people to start working virtually from home. We've yet never considered it because we're so trapped in our industrial era mindsets, where we're used to being able to see people physically. And while there are great merits of that physical working together in terms of collaboration, the co-worker experience, and the sheer vibe of being able to belong to a workplace. But having said that, we've been very inconsiderate for being able to provide this option to very many categories of employees, despite the fact that we have the kind of level of connectivity available. And so suddenly this became a reality, and a forced reality, a mandated reality. And I think it sent everyone scampering back to be able to figure technology, to be able to figure how do you work virtually with people. And I must say that organizations that were already working virtually have had a head start on being able to do this successfully, because they were already used to working with remote teams and influencing and managing work with workforces that were geographically dispersed. But for most of us, this has really allowed us to be able to manage down, and we already don't have the ability to sustain ourselves. We're already seeing this, organizations going on an overdrive to be able to maintain efficiencies first, manage the business first, without reduce the costs first, before we ever get down to managing people. And the only way we manage people is like this, which is really to be able to, I dare say, knee-jerk reactions, and leaves you wondering 17th day into the lockdown, and we've already decided that we can't manage what it is that we have on hand. And no one's questioning the wisdom of all these large organizations doing this. I mean, it's for them to know how their organizations are poised and what decisions they need to be able to make. But here is what we're looking at: 136 million jobs at risk post-corona. And I'm not here this morning to be able to give you some more bad news or to be able to be the person calling out the doom and the gloom scenarios. I'm here for quite the contrary. In fact, all of this and other difficult decisions that organizations have been compelled to make in these difficult times, I'm here to be able to question how it is that we're actually managing that. I'm here to question the custodians of people and people engagement and people morale. What are we doing about how these decisions get managed? At the point of influence, what roles do we play to be able to be able to soften some of these blows to whatever extent possible? To what extent are we making sure that the very resources we need post the lockdowns for recovery are not the ones, we're not cutting literally the branches that we are sitting on at this point in time? And I'm going to raise some of these concerns as we go along, because this community is the champion of engagement. This community is the champion of people. This is the community that's supposed to be the voice of the people. And it reminds me of a very interesting episode in my own career when I worked with Low Lintas and Partners. That's what they were called at that time. And, I had joined them from Shell, and you worked with ADNOC in the Middle East. So I had just joined them from an oil and gas company. So I did a diagnostic as a president HR who was managing HR in a communications consulting firm for the first time. I went through a diagnostic. I was figuring what change the organization required, what process improvements we required. And I'd submitted a very glorious report to the then CEO and managing director. So he received it, and I heard nothing from him after that. So there was like a week that passed, 2 weeks that passed. And I must admit, I was feeling rather disconcerted. I was also feeling rather, a little disengaged in the context of not even having a conversation around the diagnostic that I'd done, the glorious analysis that I'd done, the kind of data that I'd submitted to him, the plans for improvement that I'd submitted. And so I finally decided to speak to him about it. And I asked him whether he'd received my report and was he ready to be able to talk about all this. And he said, "Oh, that's a lovely report. And, I meant to actually tell you that. It was fantastic, nice diagnostic." And he was quiet. And I said, "Is there anything you want to talk about? I mean, there are a lot of plans there. There are suggestions there, recommendations there for improvement. You want to be able to talk about that?" And he said, "Yeah, I said, I will be sending you a monthly report, of course, of what it is that I'm achieving, but I was just wondering whether you thought I was on the right track, and would you like to talk about this?" And he turns around and he says, "Look, you know what, to me," and I think this has been the most profound thing I've ever heard about human resources as a function. He said that, "Look, it's great to have this kind of analysis, and it's great to have plans, and it's great to have ideas for improvement. And you're very, you're experienced, you're competent, which is the reason why you're in this job. Now, when I look at human resources and the contribution human resources makes within my organization," he said, "I want you to play just two roles. Yeah, you ought to be the ally to my business. So work with them to succeed. And I want you to become the voice the champion of my people." And he actually used the terminology, "I want you to be the union leader of my people." And he said, "I know you're doing a great job and your team's doing a great job when you attract traffic to yourself. which means that the minute something goes wrong, do people look for you first? Are you attracting the footfall? Are people reaching out to you when something goes wrong, or when they feel sad, or when they're feeling bad, or they're feeling bad? Do they reach out to you first? So are you the go-to person when things go amiss or when there's a crisis? And then in the two roles that I'm expecting, which is ally of business, I want to see you come here, fight for the businesses, ask us for resources, tell us we're being unreasonable, tell us how we need to support the businesses to improve. I want you to come here fighting for the employees, telling me what it is that I'm not getting me to be able to build my own sensitivity and my own EQ to understand what it is that people are actually experiencing here within the organization, their pain points, which I'm not being able to comprehend clearly. When I see you fight for the business and when I see you fight for the people, I know you're doing a great job. So what I'm going to ask here is a question for reflection. And we just pause only for a second here, which is, even as your organization is going around reacting, and I must say reacting, because we're doing more reaction than responding, but even responding to the COVID-19 crisis, is what is the role we've played as HR? Yeah, have we been the champions of business? Have we been the champions of our people? Have we fought with the business to be able to do what is right at this time? Have we been the voice of conscience? Have we been the voice of compassion? Because the world has changed, and the world has changed, and how? And I dare say it needs more and more champions of compassion, which is the purpose of my talk here today. But I'm going to go back to this whole phenomenon of engagement. I mean, engagement as a terminology is continuously being used very loosely. And while, I believe that as custodians, very significant custodians, and everyone's a custodian of engagement within organizations, it's ever so important to be able to understand what do we really mean when we use the word engagement. So engagement is being used loosely to talk about involvement or something that's interesting or something that is, entertaining. So for all these words, interesting, entertaining, we're using the word engagement. In fact, I'm really appalled at some of the posts that I see on social media where there are groups of employees dancing, and this is part of a program or whatever. And I'm a great one for enjoyment and for joy and fun and all of that. But somebody who's making everybody dance to some music, and the footnote is that you're our employees of an organization where I delivered a program where everyone's having a great time and they're dancing, as you can see, and all this is leading to high levels of productivity within the organization. Now, I want us all to pause here a bit to be able to make out the distinction between fun and joy, between socialization, and between engagement. Engagement is intense stuff. Yeah, engagement is when we're talking about discretionary contribution. Engagement is the circumstances that we create within organizations, and this is difficult to do. And therefore, it dismays me when I see people make scant of the word engagement. Engagement is the ability to be able to evoke contribution to the organization, in the welfare of the organization, the best interest of the organization, that you didn't necessarily demand from employees. So this is a seamless contribution, a strong intellectual connection, a very strong emotional and passionate connection to work. Engagement requires us to be able to build a very positive relationship between employees and work, such that there are contributions being made which are creative, which are innovative, which are far beyond what we asked employees to do. So I want you to pause the next time you use the word engagement, and we'll spend some more time talking about this, because it's far, far more intense, important, and serious than dancing in a program or celebrating people's birthdays or having samosa parties, which is all great. It's just fantastic. It adds to the socialization element within an organization, it adds to fun and joy within the organization. But when we start as professionals using this word loosely, we're actually misleading the line managers within the organization to also do the same, and to also presume that the fun and joy activities have any remote connection to productivity and contribution. I'm going to take you a few steps back to the Hawthorne studies, and I want to talk a bit about this with all of you. Many of you would be familiar with this. This is sociologist Elton Mayo's experiment, which was done in 1924, at the Hawthorne plant of the Western Electric Company, which was the then name of GE. The purpose of this experiment was to be able to have a group of people. So there's an experiment group, a control group, and the idea was to be able to figure the impact conditions had on productivity, working conditions had on productivity. So they had intense light, they changed some other things around, and they looked at how it is that productivity improved. And they did find the productivity improved for the experiment group initially. And then something phenomenal happened, that the experiment group kept improving, and now exponentially over the control. And the reason that the experiment group improved their productivity so dramatically is because they, in fact, landed into another insight of the experiment that they were actually attempting to be able to drive, which is they landed on the insight that people are extremely motivated to be able to produce when they know they're receiving attention, when they know people are interested in what it is that they're actually producing, and most importantly, when they begin feeling valued. So I'm going to repeat that. People produce the best when they know that what they're doing is being noticed, that someone's interested in what they produce every day, and most importantly, they feel valued in the process of what they're doing. So I want us to be able to reflect on the Hawthorne effect in the context of the current times that we exist in modern workplaces, and especially in the context of remote working. I find knee-jerk reactions, and we've had, in fact, about 3 weeks ago, we did a webinar on working from home through the LNOD roundtable. It was very well attended, and there were lots of companies that came back to us after that asking, can you do independent sort of webinars for our leaders, because there's a lot of chaos within, and most of our leaders don't know how to use the tools, don't know how to, most importantly, don't know how to manage productivity remotely, have never worked with teams remotely, and don't know how to be able to do this. And the knee-jerk reactions, because we've all been just so unprepared for what it is that has unfolded in the last couple of weeks, is that there's been a tendency to ask people to remain logged in the whole day, just because, so that that they're working. There are multiple check-ins during the day, multiple calls offline during the day, and there is clearly a lack of trust, lack of process, and lack of ability to know how to manage productivity remotely. So rather than obsessing, and again, this comes from our industrial era mindsets, because we're so used to working with physical teams, rather than obsessing with whether people are getting the better of us, whether working from home means being on a vacation and sometimes looking at what needs to get done. There's mass confusion on how do you get any remote working done through sales teams. There is a lot of other questions on how do we manage so many multiple teams, because these people are supposed to collaborate between each other. And how would I know I'm feeling so helpless and so out of control? Now, notwithstanding the out of control phenomena, which is natural when you're working from home initially, what this needs to actually culminate into is how valued are we being able to make our people feel even as they're working remote. What I mean by this is that rather than obsessing about what they're doing through the day and through the 8 hours or the 10 hours or whatever you're expecting them to be able to contribute, is to be able to be more fixated on what they contribute and how you help them contribute that. And that requires predominantly for the leader or the manager of people to be clear about what it is that he or she is trying to achieve in terms of work. I'm going to take you all back to, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ram Charan's, leadership pipelines. And he speaks about transitions that leaders make through the hierarchy. And I'm going to take you through the very first transition, which is from leading self to leading others. And I want you to just pause there, just from leading self to leading others. My suspicion is that most managers within organizations have mentally not made that one transition to begin with, which is, what does it mean to lead self vis-a-vis to lead others? What does it mean to be able to get work or productivity from other people? How do we get somebody else to feel intrinsically motivated about what it is that we're trying to achieve? How do we make them feel valued through that process? And so I'm going to leave you with some vocabulary as we go along. The Hawthorne Effect, which is, as we are managing people and getting them to be able to deliver tasks, how valued can we make people feel remotely? And valued is not just about the process of being able to recognize them all the time. And I know that that's just all well done and, sort of mails copied to 100 people saying this person did such a great job, which is fabulous but in most organizations, these have become round robins of being able to praise different people at different points in time. So while I'm not taking that away, it's better to have some praise than no praise. I want you to think of the concept of the Hawthorne effect, which is how valued are we making people feel as they're performing on their own. It can't be easy for them to work on their own. Most people have not done this themselves. Just as much as the managers have not led remote teams, most people have not worked from home. What does it mean to remain motivated to work from home? And what are we doing about being able to make that happen? I mean, this is such a creative space, and you can think of 100 ways in which you can actually make people, but if we're on the track of being able to wanting to let people feel valued through this process of remote working. So let's come back to the basics. What is employee engagement? And I'm hoping that after this webinar, we don't use this terminology loosely and we get this once and for all. Employee engagement is a complex phenomenon. It's defined physically, intellectually, and emotively. It's the extent to which people feel passionately about their jobs, are committed to the organization to put discretionary effort into their work, which means they won't just produce, they'll produce it with quality. They won't just check the box, they'll make sure that it's actually accurate and right. They'll make you look good as a result of what it is they're producing. They'll reduce the quantum of checking, rechecking, iteration, reiteration that you need to go through. They will reduce your load and make your job easier so that you can do the real work rather than obsessing about what it is that they're producing by using your time more strategically. Employee engagement is not the same as employee satisfaction. I'm going to leave another piece of advice here, and it's I want people to use this for reflection, which is do not get carried away by your employee engagement scores. They can be deeply manipulated based on what questions you're asking. So what questions are you asking, and you can get great scores. Maybe you're not asking the more important questions. Maybe you're not asking the real questions. Maybe you're not really hitting the nail where you really need to hear the bad news, the discordant information, and start working around it. So I'm only going to leave a space of caution here for everyone, which is to re-examine what are you asking when you do employee engagement surveys. And I'm hoping that you have some pulse or some mechanism to be able to find out from your employees, how are you doing as an employer or as a representative of the employer? How are you doing during this crisis? Not just how are they doing during this crisis, but how are you doing during this crisis? And I'm going to be able to bring you back to engagement by talking about engagement. In short, is being able to engage people with their heads, which is garnering their intellectual contribution. Engaging them through the heart, which is, do they feel passionate and emotionally engaged with what it is that the organization is doing? And hands, which is, are they engaged in terms of wanting to make contributions? Are the hands forward or are they at the back? And one of the problems that we have with our questions around trusting people's productivity remotely is because we're not sure we're managing these circles very well. Which is, do we inspire people intellectually? Do we get them inspired with what we know and our own expertise so that they aspire to become experts themselves and to learn all aspects of the job rather than winging it? If we see supervisors who are winging it, we're learning how to wing it rather than actually learning the nitty-gritties of the technical knowledge, functional knowledge to be able to do our jobs well. Heart, do we see managers being interested in what it is that they're producing? Are they checking the box? Because if they're checking the box, it's not uncommon. I've done focus group discussions with the millennials, and most of them say that we've got managers who are fearful. Yeah, they're scared. They're themselves scared. So I'm not sure they're going to be able to inspire a lot of safety or a lot of confidence in us. That they try aligning all the time with authority, so they don't speak their minds. And at most times, they check the box because they don't agree with what it is that the organization is trying to do. So I want you to be able to consider all of this, head, heart, hands. How do we win them over intellectually, get them to contribute intellectually, get them to get passionate about what they're doing, and to be able to contribute physically in terms of with their hands? Especially in times of crisis, there can be nothing more powerful than to have a very significantly large number of people who are available to you, waiting like soldiers to contribute, to be able to think of the best out of the box solutions that you can think of at times like this. Are passionate about making the organization win, want to work towards business continuity, want to work over the recovery plans to be able to make the organization survive and succeed on the other side and contribute what it takes. Most people are saying they're working very, very long hours from the work from home. And I think the couple of things I want people to examine around this, which is, A, are you working very hard because you don't know how to work remote, and therefore you're struggling with your own organizing yourself, personal effectiveness on how it is that you're organizing yourself in your time. Uh, are you working too hard because you're actually being overburdened, or are you everyone working long hours because we're disorganized about how we allocate work through these remote times? Are we taking too long because these are indeed crisis situations? We're dealing with difficult times, and maybe that's the reason why everybody needs to put their shoulder to the wheel and work on new projects, new ideas, new solutions that organizations need at this time. So what does it mean? What it means to win heads, hearts, and hands in times of change. I mean, what incredible times to be able to leverage engagement. What incredible times to be able to get people to demonstrate discretionary contribution. When people think out of the box on solutions, when people think innovation in times like this is what you're actually getting. This is engagement in action. So discretionary contribution. Are you getting discretionary contribution? Are you getting people willing to do what it takes, like I said, like soldiers, to be able to do what it's required to be able to make the organization win and keep their heads above the water at this time? I'm going to start giving you a couple of hacks on how you can actually go around winning heads, hearts, and minds. The very first question that I'm going to ask is how well do we really know our people? And I know this sounds like some existential question, but I want to be able to point out here that a very significant number of us know people who are talent basis their CV or the roles that they're playing within the organization right now. I mean, we've got to admit to ourselves that we've not gotten to really know people completely. So I'm going to say, use this time, and going forward, let's work on engagement by really knowing people, by really knowing them as people and not on basis their CVs. The fundamental mood challenge around these times and the way in which some of the people-related challenges are being managed is that what we're doing can really hamper trust in our relationships forever if we don't manage the employer-employee relationship well through this crisis. And trust is a function of self-disclosure. It's the ability to show vulnerability, and it's the ability to have honest conversations. So I want you to note all these three words so that you're able to reflect on it: self-disclosure, ability to show vulnerability, and the ability to have honest conversations. This is true for individuals one-on-one. This is as true in the context of the organization and its people. I want to talk a bit about the progress principle. This is the name of a book, but it very significantly distinguishes the difference between being a control freak and nagging people to be able to work as compared to engaging with them to be able to ensure that you know how they're progressing with the tasks that are given. A lot of employees feel that the way in which they are led is they're given a job, they're not told why it's being done, they're not told how to get it done, but they're just supposed to get it done so that the leader looks good. So I want to talk a bit about progress principle and how, as HR professionals, it's important to work through performance. Performance management is not the form you're filling at the end of the year, but to be able to work through performance, which is to have managers engage with the process of execution rather than just be interested in the outcome of what are the instructions that have been given to people. This allows managers to be able to work through what stumbling blocks people are having, what challenges they're having as they're executing, know early in the game that they're on the wrong track rather than be surprised. So a lot of the surprise that we experience with performance is coming out of not being able to be clear ourselves on what we want, to be able to provide that clarity to people, answer the question why, in terms of why we're doing what we're doing, and more importantly, how they can do it. And that's where you bring in your expertise to be able to allow people to get there faster. I want to be able to introduce the concept of the inner work life. So we all engage with the outer work life, but what is it that we go through every day when, for example, if we have an idea or a suggestion and it's not taken, or if we did get included in a team where we didn't expect to get included, or we were expected to turn around something at short notice and we are anxious or worried about being able to stand up competent. There is a continuous inner work life that people experience within organizations. Interesting to be able to think of what is the inner work life of our people right now as they work through the lockdown alone on their own, chugging along to be able to still contribute to the organization. What is the inner work life of our people? What a question worth reflecting. And have we thought enough about this, and what is it that we're doing? Because the inner work life is the morale that we're actually talking about. I want to spend a minute or two talking about employee connectedness, because a very significant part of engagement, and I do know that there is communication and there is some form of communication that's going on through every organization. You're using all the tools to be able to have team meetings. Some of the CEOs are addressing large groups of people and so on. It's just ever so important to be able to marry what I said earlier in terms of showing vulnerability, having honest conversations to be able to generate trust, and to be able to continuously work around what we call employee connectedness, which is letting people know who we are, letting people know what's going on with us right now, letting people know how do we plan to be able to sustain and exist, and to let people know how they need to contribute to be able to enable us to do that. So connectedness, because one of the things that are extremely unpopular, and you should know that, is the credibility of town halls. Most employees are disappointed, dismayed, anguish filled with the town halls that they're made to attend. And they mostly feel that they're non-value adding communications. There is some rhetoric, there is some sort of global sort of announcements that are made. There's some global stuff that's spoken about. There's no real insight or takeaway that most employees take away from town halls. It's extremely important to use this, especially in remote times, in working from home times, is to maintain employee connectedness, which is, do they know what's going on? Do they understand the large picture? I must submit here that I hear horror stories every day of reduction of people suddenly finding out that their colleagues have disappeared. Someone even told me that they reached out to IT for some support, and the IT person said that he's been asked to go. So we're not being honest. We're not being straightforward. We're not being transparent. And for the groups of us who are being transparent, are doing this part well, kudos to you, and you must really share your best practices so more organizations can learn from you. But connectedness, even in adversity, in adverse times, is ever so important. It's very, very integral for engagement and for performance, because we're finally talking about engagement manifesting into performance. It's extremely important to be able to demonstrate what I call intentionality. Intentionality is the seriousness that you have to be able to perform. And it's important to be able to give people direction on how you want this intentionality to be able to convert into performance. Most employees, through focus groups and discussions and through our various forums, tell us how their own leaders don't seem very serious about wanting to contribute much. A lot of people believe nothing much can come out of this. Let's just wait for this lockdown to end and we'll see what's coming up on the other side. If you're watching closely what's going on with other organizations who are ahead on the curve with the COVID-19 crisis, you'll see this is very much more long drawn than 21 days. But I don't want to become the predictor of gloom and doom. I just want us to know that we got to be able to prepare for the long haul here, and to draw lessons from the countries which are already ahead in this game, to be able to know that what we're up against is far more serious, is far more intense, is far more complex, requires far more thinking, far more out-of-the-box thinking, new solutions to be able to still maintain employee morale, engagement, and contribution through this very unprecedented crisis. I want to talk about leader as coach. I mean, what better time to be able to coach your people? In fact, what better time to groom children? What better time to raise children, to be able to understand how to be resilient through these circumstances? And how do you really triumph these circumstances and still emerge winner? Because a leader is someone who will take you to places you will not go to on your own. So are you the kind of leader? Are we creating the kind of managers and leaders whose hands people will take in the dark and know that this person will get me and land me to a good place? And I think we got to be able to rise to those heroic expectations that people have from leaders, to be able to say that, I'm here and I'm being resilient and I'm role modeling that resilience. And I'm also able to show you my vulnerability. And I think that is what is the kind of leadership that people are seeking at this time. Let me spend a couple of minutes to talk about compassion. And I know that people see compassion as sympathy, as empathy, and it's all of that and it's more. It's also seen as a very weak word in the business context somehow. Compassion, let's look at what it is. It is the key. In fact, while empathy is the tendency to feel other people's emotion and take them on as if you're feeling them yourself, compassion is the intent to contribute to the well-being of others. Is the true intent, not lip service, but real intent to want to contribute to the well-being of others, to the good life of others, to the prosperity of others, to do what is required in the interest of another person. And I want you all to reflect on the fact that compassion is not at all a soft skill. And I'm not raising the concept of compassion only because of the difficult times we are in. Compassion is something that organizations will win if they continuously demonstrate this, whether in tough times or otherwise. So I want you to consider compassion is not a soft skill, because it's not a soft skill. We see it as a soft skill because we're actually manifesting compassion in an empathetic manner, in a sympathetic manner. And we believe that the minute we show compassion in a workplace, it means we don't hold people accountable for performance. It means we allow people to do what they feel like. It's when we don't live up to our rules, or when we perhaps don't have enough rules to be able to assert ourselves. And we're also worried about the consequence of not of demonstrating compassion. So I want to clarify what compassion is, because I think we've misguided or we've misunderstood what compassion really is. And I want you to look at compassion in the context of accountability. So compassion has all the space in a workplace. It needs to be seen in combination with accountability. And so in life, as in organizations, so in life. But I'm going to try and look at this 2x2 matrix. For example, if you're in this box, which is a high accountability organization with low compassion, you'd be people who are workhorses, who don't care what's going on in people's lives, who don't understand. For example, I read a very interesting article, and this appeared somewhere outside I think the UK. And it said Indian employers are making their employees work extra during work from home. That Indian employees are overworked during work from home. And that this is leading to a whole lot of mental health issues. I was intrigued with the title, that Indian employees overworked at home. And it spoke about, the inability of a lot of managers to be able to manage this work from home phenomena. And it spoke about how there is no thought for the fact that people who are working from home, not everybody lives in the luxury of a large apartment. Not everybody has the privacy and the space to be able to take on as many calls, or perhaps as many team meetings that you're calling for. That a lot of these people are living on their own. They need to go and get their groceries. They need to be able to manage housework. Many of them have small children. They have parents who are unwell and aging. They're perhaps more vulnerable to the current situation. People have responsibilities, and I'm not trying to be a champion for work-life balance here. I'm simply saying that if we just had a little more human considerations, maybe we would plan our meetings, our communication, and what we want to get done from home differently. So when you're high accountability, low compassion, you're making decisions which are not necessarily in the well-being of individuals, which is heavily task-oriented and not quite concerned with the consequence this may be having on people. If you're a low accountability, low compassion workplace, then this is really a very uninspiring place to work. This is clearly will not inspire any discretionary contribution. High compassion, low accountability. I want to focus on this box because this is the Achilles. This is the reason why we don't want to talk about compassion within organizations, which is, what if we get so compassionate that we don't get performance? What if we get so compassionate that we don't hold people accountable, or we don't manage our risks carefully? What if we get so compassionate that we'll have governance and other issues within the organization? So high compassion, low accountability doesn't quite work within organizations, because this is not high compassion, low accountability leads to low performance, which means that you may have compassion, but it's not balanced with accountability, as a result of which you may end up throwing the baby with the bathwater, which is not consider compassion, because you're not being able to balance that well with accountability. So for all the organizations that have a compassion, misplaced compassion in excess of accountability, I must tell you that, the sustainability of organizations like this is very limited. And in fact, the organization may end up not encouraging compassion because you don't have the ability and the wisdom to balance it with accountability. So the topmost box, which is accountability with compassion, is the way in which compassion pans out in the workplace. So engagement without compassion is incomplete. And so how do we demonstrate compassion to people in a crisis? So quick ones, and I know I'm heading towards the end of the time we have planned here, but we started a little late, so I'm going to continue with this. Open and transparent communication during managing a crisis. So crisis communication is about being direct, being honest, being inspiring, encouraging. So even if you're making really, really tough decisions, please consider and reconsider how it is that this is being communicated with people. This cannot happen in the darkness of the lockdown. This cannot happen in the secrecy of the lockdown. This cannot happen without letting people know what exactly is going on. If you're sure that you have balanced compassion with accountability and that this is required in a time like this, then there should be and must be open and transparent communication, and people have a right to have this access to this communication, even if they're going to be sacrificed as a result of what's going on within the organizations right now. Remaining engaging and productive through remote teams. I mean, I know this has been a difficulty. Most of us are going up a steep learning curve on this. It has led to a lot of chaos in the styles of working, but everyone's going up a steep learning curve. So it requires a lot of empathy as people are going around doing this. Important to be able to maintain health as we're going through the work from home, be mindful and inclusive of people, not exclude them from team meetings, schedule catch-up calls, but just enough to not have to really become a bugbear and interrupt people's productivity actually by being able to ask them to get on to too many meetings. We must never forget to have the fun. So even remote, you can have coffee discussions, have a working lunch, plan fun things even remote, and you can continue doing that. You can also connect, by the way, to just chat, which is not anything to do with work. The follow through is important. What you want from people is important. This is such a test of the clarity of what it is that the leader or the manager really wants in terms of work. 4 rules and 5 topics to consider in the context of work from home. Do you have the right tools? Do you have the right rules? This requires ground rules. I recommended on my webinar that get a work from home agreement from people because they're using your technology and accessing your data. Don't be lax on your data at this time. So otherwise we're going to have consequences of mismanagement of data and proprietary knowledge at this time. Norms, which is how we join, how we appear, how do you communicate, how do you behave, how do you listen, and the rest of that through these remote channels. And the culture, which is how do we get to know each other? How do we work through the hierarchy? How do we trust each other? How do we generate psychological safety for people to be able to speak up and remain engaged? And the resilience, I mean, the everlasting, ever so important resilience. There's no other way to build resilience than to demonstrate that as managers. If we are falling apart, if we become the callers of doom and gloom, and people are looking so closely at HR on how it is that you're behaving through this crisis. So resilience is going to be so important. I've just listed down a few unprecedented decisions that we're taking at this time. And I'm saying we're unprepared for it by virtue of some of the feedback that I've been getting from organizations and through the forum, both the forums that I lead, LNOD Roundtable and the Women Leadership Forum of Asia, making manpower reduction decisions. How can we show compassion and be worried about the morale of the people who are left behind? I hope we are managing this well. I'm just wondering with some of these decisions, because we're not even on the 16th or the 17th day of the lockdown, and we're already beginning to make all these decisions. And I'm wondering how much of these are well considered, how much of them are knee-jerk, how many of these decisions coming from the insecurity of the leadership, and also from inability to find creative solutions, is to just cut cost indiscreetly with the lowest hanging fruit, perhaps the most damaging way of reducing cost at this time. I leave it to individual organizations and their discretion and their leadership on what they need to do to be able to survive going forward. But as HR, whether we've done our best, whether we've managed this well, if it is inevitable, then how well are we managing it in the context of compassion and engagement? onboarding of new offers. I mean, there is a pandemonium here with offers that have been made, promises made, summer internships that have been turned back, offers made to campuses, for young people, young professionals starting their careers this year, where people have gone stone quiet with no communication. You can be unclear, you're granted the being unclear, unsure, but to go completely quiet with this is so unprofessional. It's so unbecoming, so lacking in compassion. And so onboarding of new offers needs to be considered. It cannot be mismanaged, and especially because students have lesser power in the equation, they cannot be victimized as a result of what's going on at this point. We cannot be showing our efficiencies by mismanaging this. Hypo talent, extremely important to be able to look at how we're managing promises made to high potential. I know this is all on a pause right now, so is career growth. But we need to be able to consider what we're going to do with some of these ongoing programs as we get along. Performance rewards. I mean, I know already of some organizations that have rolled back the bonuses that were already announced in March or in February earlier this year. And I think this is, again, I would say knee-jerk, not well thought through, lowest hanging fruit to be able to reduce cost, individual motivations to be able to look smart and efficient at the cost of people. So I'm going to ask organizations, especially HR, to be able to influence and relook at, making decisions early in the game on rolling back bonuses. Learning journeys. And I know this is another thing which we believe is so easy to throw away, and we believe people should do this on their own, and it's not our responsibility, but this is going to be ever so important, finding places for reflection. Someone mentioned recently that one of the big challenges we're having right now is because organizations are not investing in leadership development. And then they're now sitting and struggling with issues to do with inclusion, with remote working, with managing virtual teams, with keeping employees engaged, business continuity planning, all those challenges, because most people are ill-prepared to be able to do this. Again, I want to qualify this to say that there are organizations doing this right, and I think we must seek these organizations out and be able to learn from the wisdom of their leadership. I'm going to make this point because it's important, especially for human resources, is to leave an idea with you, which is to say, look at or appoint a group of people to be able to look at all the processes that you simplified because people were working from home, and how many of these required lesser people, and you perhaps find processes you didn't need at all. So apply design thinking to this and make sure that you're able to revisit the quality of the processes and systems. So that you're able to keep your customer right at the center of it, show empathy, and improve processes and systems at this time. I'm going to leave you with this last slide. Remember, how you treat your people during this crisis is going to define your brand. So all the work you do after this on employer brand is going to be difficult if you did not manage this well at this time. So I think with that, I come to an end of my talk with you today. I'm delighted to make this two-sided. Please feel free to ask me questions.
So anyone would like to ask question? Sujaya, can you remove this slide sharing?
Yes, yes.
Will share?
Yes, I can. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So
Hello.
Answer questions, yes.
Yes, Sumit.
Hello.
Yes, Sumit, ask.
Ms. Sujay, my question is, as you rightly said about the employee engagement, is not about employee welfare or employee well-being. It's to do more how you are involved, how you're involving your employees with the organization objectives. So what are those activities that you think can be part of the employee engagement per se?
I think, first of all, getting your managers to manage the transition of leading self to leading others, because people who are promoted way up in the hierarchy are also struggling with the ability to lead, manage teams, and to inspire them to perform. So I think a very significant amount of work on what does it mean to get other people to perform. I think that you need to invest in processes, platforms, internally to be able to, and also to groom, train people on being able to carry out open conversations with their people. I mean, we presume a lot of these behaviors or these competencies are in place, but they're not. And you'll be surprised when you get down to really talking to employees that how few of your managers really know how to have an open conversation. How many of them know how to lead a meeting where you're explaining what needs to get done? How many of them really know how to carry out a difficult conversation with people? So I'm just saying, focus on communication and conversation. Don't presume that your people know how to do it, because a lot of them struggle with that, but they're expected to know how to do it, so they carry on with that. I think the other part that I definitely talk about is revisiting what questions you ask when you're measuring engagement, because then you'll know the pain points and the areas which require attention. A lot of teams, interestingly, when you ask pertinent questions, you'll find that some of them are really toxic teams, but they're working very hard and perhaps the biggest contributors to your revenue. It's not uncommon to find that. And it kind of busts the theory on the fact that, you will necessarily get high performance only from highly engaged people. So you will find all kinds of paradoxes emerging if you're asking the right questions. So I encourage you to be able to do that, so you're able to go to the right people to be able to support them. I think valuing leaders who grow other leaders, who are grooming people, wanting to move up in terms of strategic thinking and contribution themselves. I think you need to redefine some of those paradigms so that you value leaders who are truly engaging in terms of being able to get people to contribute. So I think that, yes, I think these are 2 or 3 ideas that I can give you right away. If you also change and ask the real questions, and I recommend strongly everybody on this group do a pulse at the end of the lockdown to be able to get feedback from employees on how you managed engagement. How did you manage work from home? Which leaders have been able to manage high levels of productivity through the work from home and the lockdown? I think it's important, because the virtual working is pretty much here to stay. It's not going to go away as a result of this. And so you want people who are competent, who can get people to work no matter which crisis. Also, huge premium on resilience, on how this crisis has been managed by various leaders within the organization. I think it's huge testing time on the quality of leadership and people managers that we have within organizations.
So Rajaram has asked one question. As per Global Gallup survey of 2018-19, 85% employees are disengaged. What needs to be done by the organization to keep them engaged?
Yeah, and I think that the reason why 85% people seem disengaged all over the world is because I think as a community have not been able to, and I don't mean just the HR community, I just feel as a business community, I think we need to work around creating a great relationship between people and work. And I think that, we get carried away with qualifications, and, we pigeonhole people basis their backgrounds, we pigeonhole people basis their positions. We most certainly have allowed unprepared people to move up the hierarchy. I mean, look at this whole residency piece that we do around promotions. I mean, but for doing time, you'll keep moving up, not because you have the ability to be able to lead people and engage people to performance. So we've also allowed undercooked people to move up the hierarchy. And I think as a result of that, I mean, isn't it surprising? Because it can be very uninspiring to be led by someone who does not have intentionality, who's not necessarily an expert at what he does. You're not going to gain anything significant by being in his team. The individual himself or herself struggles with being able to network and to be able to influence key people within the organization. It's not fun being part of teams like that. And I think we've given away positions mid-level upwards too easily within organizations. There's got to be a stronger entry barrier to getting a leadership job.
So Jignesh has asked a question. Can you share example of one or two best HR initiative any MNC initiated to build professional managing work from home efficiently?
I think there are lots of them doing it, and I must say that the head start that people have, some of the organizations have, is that some of these managers were already managing remote teams or geographically distributed teams. I must submit that they have definitely got a head start in being able to manage this better. But there are large MNCs who are working well from home. I know of some of them who have mobilized large numbers of people in the work from home, and it has taken a couple of days, but it has all settled into being able to continue contributing. I think it's a great time to think of creative contribution as well. For example, sales teams. I mean, what do they do because they're not going to be out in the market? But there are lots of people whose work was essentially to be able to be out there on how do they manage things remote? What are the new activities or new actions they can undertake even while they're at home? And I think that those who've been able to redefine work, get work executed creatively, and keep people inspired are the ones who are doing great on the work from home. So it's not like you don't have success stories around this. I think they do. But if you want a good example, some good examples around how some of the other crisis situations have been managed well, is organizations proactively reaching out to people who they had already made offers to let them know what's going on with their offer, right? Proactively reaching out to people like students to be able to say that we might delay this offer, but we're not denying it. So at this point in time, just hang in there, all right? We care for you. We know we've made you an offer. Also, to be able to reach out to people who are already serving notice periods to join your organization, to let them know that I know you've resigned from your previous employer, you counted on our promise, and we will live up to that. So to just be able to reach out to people proactively as well is a great show of professionalism. It's what will protect your brand. It will get people excited to join your organization because you care. So I think these are great times to show professionalism because it is indeed a crisis, and each organization will be evaluated basis how professionally they manage the chaos.
Uma, you wanted to ask something. Uma.
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, yes. Uma.
Yeah. I want to ask, in your opinion, Sujaya, thank you for the excellent ideas. But what's your assessment of how prepared our leaders and managers are to implement at least part of your ideas? What's your sense of it? And if not, in these times, what kind of interventions would you suggest to make them ready?
Yes. So I think my submission is, I think the preparedness, you can never be well prepared enough for anything like this. I started my presentation by saying this is unprecedented, even for people who have 30 and 40 years of experience, even more. So this is definitely a difficult time. I must say that even if we saw this coming, and we can't say we didn't see it coming, we saw it coming. I think most organizations, and I must submit, large groups of us were perhaps living in denial, had not started work on this already. The lockdown came onto us as a bit of a surprise. The work from home mandated by organizations has come as a surprise. So it's also not left people with a lot of time to prepare around this. So the answer to your question is that I understand why people have not been prepared. We could not have been prepared for something as large as this. Having said that, our ability to be able to become prepared very early in the game so that we're able to manage this well. I think it's a mixed bag. There are many organizations which have still not been able to settle the chaos. I know of some organizations where they're not only reducing manpower across levels, even the leaders have started leaving the organization. Now, I'm saying that if you create this kind of pandemonium, where even your leaders don't want to be with the organization because of the way things are going inside the organization, and I'm just trying to get everyone to be more mindful. Can you imagine this? We're just on the 16th day of the lockdown at this point in time, as we speak. And we've already created so much of chaos. So to your point, yes, we need to be able to prepare leaders. We need to be able to help leaders and support leaders. We need to know this is not being managed well, and we need to step in. The LNOD Roundtable has created an HR response team, which in 11 areas of where we find perhaps organizations struggling, we're offering pro bono support to organizations, whether they're large size, whether they're mid-size or small size organization. We have a panel of experts who can help you in all areas, including if you want legal advice on manpower reorganization or reduction, whether you want to look at employee well-being issues, whether you want to look at business continuity issues. For all these challenges, we've created a group of people who can offer pro bono services. And we're very clear it's pro bono. It's just to help organizations manage their people better. So I think they need support and help. A lot of them need support and help. And what could we have done to be able to prepare for this? I think a lot of organizations that already talk about scenario building, already talk about planning in the face of disaster, those who've done work in the space of business continuity, which is which is robust and applicable in the current situation, they're definitely ahead in the game as compared to the others. So it's not like we don't have the tools. Some of us have not taken that very seriously or used it. So I'm hoping that this crisis will get people to become a little more aware, a little more serious about, never allowing us to be able to get caught on a back foot again in this situation.
So Sujaya, there are a lot of questions flowing out on here, and a lot of compliments to you on the screen. So with the constraint of time, I think we have to restrict ourselves here. Yes. And always my request is, whenever again a time permits to you, if you can again appear here on the screen some days back, so it would be beneficial to the group members. So over to Sunil. Sunil?
Yes, I just want to make a point here, which is want to thank you for listening. Thank you for your, silent participation by being able to actively listen. Please feel free to be able to send me the questions, and I'm happy to answer them offline. So if our milestone wants to send forward questions, I'm happy to respond to them.
We'll share with you. We'll share with you.
Yes, great. Sujaya, to begin with, it's a really great session. And able to hear me?
Yes, I'm able to hear you.
Yeah, fine. So great start, winning how, we can use this, the time which has come to all of us, which is, we all are unprepared, basically, to manage this situation, this time, and the entire conditions which is around us at the workplace, whether at the home or in a society. So how do we, as a HR professional, we win the heart's heart and the hands of employees? So how can we become the compassion? You really covered up quite a good the points during your session, and it has been really wonderful. You started, you covered, what is VUCA, and we were, really, I also felt like, we're waiting, something VUCA, how the VUCA is getting defined, and to see it. But you made us very, very easy for us, to get into the situation by explaining, how IC's situation has created, the workplace, or the Brexit kind of situation, or the US elections, or this present condition of the COVID. So all this defines the, the VUCA world. And now, definitely for sure, that every one of us would understand that VUCA is going to remain in a one or another form. And then into this kind of situation, what are these, the trends, the HR as a business which is being shaped up because of this unprecedented time and unexpected the challenge? And there, it's a loss of jobs, loss of the business, loss of the economy, overall economy, and cutting down onto the different kind of roles, pay cuts, deferred bonuses, and the incentives you covered. And into this situation, what important role HR can play? You also gave very good suggestion of contributing to HR by giving your past example of the business leader who had guided you, basically, like what two major roles HR can play, any HR professional, whether it's a junior or a senior most of the HR. That's one is to become an ally to the business, to understand the business needs, and how can we as a the HR professional can contribute to the business in terms of providing the resources and understanding the pain points of the business,